Tina has seen better days. By the looks of it, so has Jason. Here's your relook at the NECA Toys Friday the 13th Part 7 The New Blood Ultimate Jason Voorhees. There's a curse in these woods. Jason Voorhees' curse. They say he died as a boy, but he keeps coming back. Few have seen him and lived. Some have tried to stop him. No one can. He's out there waiting. Figure includes alternate mask, brush cutter, wood cutter, sickle, knife, tent stake, machete, and axe. While the Camp Crystal Lake killer now finds himself catching his breath, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. Probably didn't need to go that high. Jason Voorhees stands about 7 1/4 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 18 centimeters tall. Friday the 13th Part 7 The New Blood marks the first time that Jason Voorhees was portrayed by Kane Hodder. Funny enough, though, all the subsequent sequels starring Kane Hodder are considered by many to be some of the worst Friday the 13th films. This is also the first and only time we've gotten Kane Hodder as a Jason Voorhees released from NECA Toys. Still have yet to get a Part 8. Obviously don't have Jason Goes to Hell yet, and we don't also have Jason X, which I consider to be the worst of the Friday films. The reasoning why, in fact, we are also going back and looking at this figure again, is because a viewer had reached out to me, Jackson, who's actually going to be celebrating his birthday, probably in the next couple of days at the time of shooting this review. And he's actually getting this figure for his birthday, so again, happy, not quite his birthday, but happy birthday, Jackson, anyways. And of course, he did ask, because he is getting that figure for his birthday, he did also want me to go back and look at this figure again. Happy to oblige, Jackson. Happy to oblige. And again, happy upcoming birthday. A couple of comparisons we can also make as well. Let's bring in the Jason the way he looked at from before, just of course before he spent some time underwater. Here's what he looks like with the Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Voorhees. He's not as stocky as he is in the Part 7 release, but you can see he's about the same size. Another figure we can also bring in as well is the Friday the 13th Part 4 Jason. By the way, bookend on either side of Jason's are the two Jasons from the reissues. This one I think was the one we most recently looked at. This was also, I think, from the 2021 release of Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Lives. Another Jason we can also bring in as well that's going to make him a little bit smaller in size. Here's what he also looks like. Speaking of Kane Hodder, who got robbed the chance to play Jason again, here's what he looks like with the Freddy vs. Jason Voorhees. Now, the one thing that has the fans continuing to pinpoint this Jason as their favorite design of the Friday films was the fact that finally Jason had war wounds to him. He looked like he had been through hell. Emerging from his watery grave, he comes out looking like a decayed corpse, designed by Al Magliochetti and the K&B Effects. The same team, I believe, that was also responsible for designing and creating the Curse of Michael Myers mask from Halloween 6. One of my favorite looks to Jason Voorhees, one of my favorite looks of Michael Myers. Now, the figure has quite a lot of weapons to wield. I actually have already, because this figure was actually on my shelf for a while. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, wait, didn't you take him out of the tray at the beginning of this review? I just simply put the figure back in whatever weapons he was wielding at the time, back into the tray. I did always like to show you guys how I unbox these at the beginning of the review. But honestly, I did somewhat stage that. Jason normally has been on my shelf this whole time. And through that, I've also already taken the liberty of removing the relaxed hands that were normally with the figure when you first take him out of his box. These decayed hands, you can see, has very little skin left on them. They look like they're actually just mummified hands, perfectly painted in kind of like a purple color. There's a little bit of decay also throughout the fingers. I like the darker coloring of the black that they also put on the ends of the fingers. Again, I have simply just popped these out from the forearms. By the way, if you're having any tough time to remove the hands, don't start to continue to pull it until eventually you break these tiny little pegs. Rather than just instead use it like a hairdryer, you can also submerge them in hot water as well. But I have already removed them. The figure has been wielding weapons for, again, as long as it has been since I even opened up this figure in the first place. The figure has several weapons to wield. Like I said, he does come included with a butcher knife, starting small. The knife itself looks like it's been cast in silver plastic, while the actual handle looks like it's been painted. The handle looks like it has wood grain to it. Something as small like this, attention to detail is always key from NECA. This can be, again, wielded in his hands. Again, you can put him in either one of his hands. You're probably asking also, why does he have gripping hands in both sides? When you just only give him one gripping hand? Well, because he's also comes included with the bush cutter, would be also one of the reasons why the figure is going to have two gripping hands instead of just the one. The figure also comes included with a tent spike. Unlike, though, the butcher knife that we looked at that looks to be quite clean. Jason has really yet to use this to kill anybody. Jason looks like he has used this to kill somebody, as there's blood all over the tent spike. The tent spike is a nice little attention to detail because, again, we do also see it in the film as well. The figure also comes included with his machete. Now, again, like the machete doesn't have any paint at all. It's the one thing I feel like maybe I could get away with the idea that his butcher knife doesn't come included with anything, like blood-wise at least. Michael Myers would be one I would consider be more of a slasher killer that would rely on the butcher knife. Jason's all a machete guy myself, and so I feel like the machete, if anything, probably could have used a little bit of blood. I think it's a little bit too clean for my liking. Still, the handle, though, has been painted down below here in black. You can still see like the little riveted points on either side of that. Again, small little details. Always appreciate that NECA goes above and beyond when it comes to painting these pieces. Now, the figure also comes included with the axe. I guess we'll kind of look at that next, and then we'll kind of look at the things that you can trim the hedges with. The axe does look like there's a little bit of stain to the top. There's also a little bit of blood that's also on the bottom of it. It's kind of really hard to make out because it's so faded. Obviously, it isn't faded from the time that I've had this on the shelf. It just naturally came out of the tray like this. I think they could have gone a little bit more when it came to blood on this, just because, again, you only got a little bit here on the actual head, or the head of the axe, and then you got a little bit down below on the handle. And again, this can easily be clipped into his hands. This whole time, I just flicked the axe. Went right over there. I'm going to have to go and retrieve that. The figure also comes included, I can't believe that just flicked on my finger like that. The figure also comes included with a scythe. A tiny little scythe I think he does use for one single kill. The scythe itself, again, molded here in silver plastic. One thing I did notice, though, about the scythe is the way that it's curved. Mine looked like it was a little bent coming out of the tray. Other than that, though, and other than looking like that, you clearly can see that the plastic of the actual scythe blade has been sandwiched inside the plastic handle. So this isn't a case where I feel they've actually molded this all in one plastic piece and then just painted the parts and the actual handle parts. I feel like this is actually a case where they took actually the scythe and slid it inside the handle. I'm looking at the axe right now. He's looking at me. He's thinking, what did you just do? I don't know what I just did. It just flicked off my hand. I'll come and pick you up a little bit later. The figure also comes included with the woodcutter. And again, the woodcutter still looks pretty clean. Jason has yet to use it for anything, really. I don't think it necessarily, again, needs to have blood. I'm not so morbid that I'd like to have blood really on every single instrument that Jason has. There obviously are things that he can be easily just carrying around clean weapons. He doesn't have to be like, nothing has to be completely blood soaked. So again, like this one can, again, just be, without flicking this across the room, let's just take like the woodcutter and just fit it into his hands. If you're having, but by the way, again, any problems with this, similar to what I expressed for concerns, if you're having any problems removing the pegs, the same thing can also be said for when it comes to attaching weapons. If you're having any tough time to pry the plastic for the fingers, just heat the hands in hot water, or again, you can use the hairdryer. So again, he also has that. One of my favorite things, and for a while really was the thing that I had the figure displayed with, was also the bush cutter. Now, of course, he dispenses Dr. Cruz using this. He also kills, unfortunately, Tina's mom, which just unfortunately was a casualty to the fact he really did want to get down to killing Mr. Cruz. Unfortunately, though, also with Friday the 13th Part 7, heavily cut. A lot of the cool kills were cut and left on the cutting room floor. And unfortunately, with the death of Mr. Cruz, the doctor and, unfortunately, Tina's mom, their deaths were cut really short, literally and figuratively. One thing I do like about the bush cutter is that it does actually spin. Again, there's no blood on it, so he has yet to actually penetrate the dear doctor's torso, but it does actually have a spinning blade. That's a nice little touch. Now, because of this, just before we actually put this into the figure's hands, you can see there's the back of it right there. It even has like even the little pull cord on the back, although obviously you can't really pull it. Nicely painted there. You've got the actual motor there painted both in silver and in black. Down below, of course, would be the section you'd fill it up with gasoline. Really, again, nice little representation of the bush cutter. And for this, obviously, if you're going to want to put this in the figure's hands, just bend the elbow just a little bit. Now, you can also choose, depending on which side you'd like to have it on first. I find it's actually easier just to put it on this side first. The only thing I will say, though, is putting it into his hand. The little trigger down below, of course, you would squeeze in order to activate this. Just make sure that it doesn't get too close in quarters to his hand, because I've had this a couple of times where I went to put it in his hand, and then I realized I was starting to bend the trigger. Oh, no, didn't want that to happen. But put it in one hand, and then basically you're just going to take then the other hand, pry the plastic, just pry the fingers a little bit away from the palm, and then just slide it in there. You really want to be careful with this part because this is a thinner plastic. But again, like see, I just already popped the one side out. Just pop, there we go, the other hand in there. And for a while, really, I had Jason Voorhees displayed on my shelf with the actual bush cutter. It really does look good. I just wish that, if anything, they had a little bit of blood on it. I know, again, so morbid. You want blood in your machetes, you want blood on your scythes. Where does it end? Well, it ends at least in things that I saw him kind of killing people. I think if anything, I would say like the bush cutter is really the one thing I really wish that the figure, like the machete, could have just had, again, a little bit of blood on the end of the blade. The last of the figure's accessories, just going to put this to the side here, carefully removing the handle. And we're just going to put that off to the side. The last thing that Jason also comes included with is an alternate head sculpt. Now, you may prefer just to have him defaulted like this with his normal hockey mask. Again, like everything else on his body, there's some very natural wear and tear that he would develop over the several Friday films. On the side, of course, is what's left behind of what his chewed away mask would be at the end of Friday 6. Gnawed away, of course, that would also chew away a little bit at his face as well. I'll reveal it also here in a second. It's a nice looking mask. I think, if anything, the triangular chevron on the front is maybe a little bit too perfect. It's a little more irregular when you actually see it in the film. But of course, the holes are all there. This one does have, unlike the Friday 6, this one actually does have sockets for his eyes that go straight through. They haven't covered it over completely. So you could, if you had a light source, for example, you'd be able to really see Jason's eyes inside. But because they're so far back like this, they come across like just big black pools of nothingness. One of the things that people don't really like, the people that don't like Kane Hodder Jason complain really that Jason from his films always has to heavy breathe. I personally like it because I think it made him just a little bit more like a beast. But like this mask can be removable. The only thing I noticed with this mask over some of the other Jasons is it fits really tightly around the side of his face. I actually already had one strap detached on the side. I ended up having to glue it. I'm just going to remove the mask carefully. Just take that right off. And there's what Jason looks like underneath. He sort of kind of looks a little like a walnut. I think I may have even used that comparison when we were talking about the Freddy versus Jason Voorhees. But I really like this design of Jason, not having, of course, one eye on one side. It's just more of skeletal. And then on the other side, of course, he only has really one eye to look at. Now, we do see him unmasked. I mean, really, it goes without saying that in all the Friday films, really, Jason gets unmasked sooner rather than later. And of course, you also got, again, like this one, he just has gnarly looking teeth. Just look at the chewed away sides of his face. He still has like the cuts from all the previous Friday films. It's one thing that they really did attention to detail when it came to designing him. Now, there's this head sculpt, or there's also this one as well. This is more so when Tina pulls away the mask, and the mask basically splits in the middle, just separates off the sides. And then Jason kind of has this look of surprise on his face. To remove the face or to remove the head, you just want to hold onto the torso. You also want to make sure you're holding onto the chain. This chain collar, what's left behind of Friday 6, is actually a separate piece. So you want to make sure that when you're removing it, in the process, you're not actually losing the chain. We're just going to twist the head back and forth. I don't normally have a problem with this. Let's just put down the other head here for a second. Just going to detach the head from the ball joint. There we go. Why is that giving me so many problems? Like I said, though, the chain collar is a separate piece. You want to make sure you don't lose it in the process, but we're going to go ahead and take Jason's new head and pop it in place. Now, again, I don't know why. Maybe it's just the fact that the plastic has cooled a little bit. I had heated these up in preparation of shooting this review, but I guess the plastic has just cooled just a tad bit. With the alternate head now in place, the only thing that really does change between the two is kind of more the expression in his mouth. The eyes are about the same. It's not really much there different, but you can see just the amount of decay and just the fact that the skin, what little there left of it at least, really does look like disgusting. You may notice there on the back there's a hole. What's that hole for? Is that with what's left of his brain going to be oozing out? No, that's disgusting. What he does also have included with, though, is the mask that separates in the middle. So what you get basically is you get the same similar mask. Let me just put the figure down here for a second. You get the same similar mask as the original mask, but you can see that it's cracked in the middle. It's supposed to be like this. If you put the two halves together, you could realistically form Jason's mask. Although, obviously it's not supposed to be completely together like this. The idea in mind, though, is if you look at the inside of the strap, there's a peg right there. If you look at the Jason, where that hole was at the back, we're just going to take the mask and you're going to take the peg and you're just going to plug that in. It doesn't sit super securely. So every once in a while, if you are, for example, like moving his head around, you'll notice like this comes off very, very easily. And it doesn't also help the fact that this is a very soft plastic. But if you wanted to, you can kind of put the two mask pieces together. But really, the idea in mind is that these are supposed to fan out like this, and then you have Jason's surprised look on his face. What? The only thing I really wish that this figure could have had, and this is something I'm going to talk a little bit about, maybe potentially get a version 2 of him released down the road from NECA Toys. I mean, obviously the one thing that's omitted from this figure is he doesn't have the little nails all over his body. I think that could be easily fixed by something that they could release down the road with version 2. But also one thing that's omitted from this release is the fact he doesn't have flames anywhere on his body. Because, of course, at one point when he gets down in the cellar, Tina ignites him. And I would love to have seen Jason with with fire effects that he could have attached all over his body. Maybe something similar to what we got with either Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Just little flame effects that you could probably clip onto the front and the back of the figure's body. Again, I think there's a prime reasoning for releasing this guy down the road as a version 2. Speaking of versions 2, one thing I also did want to mention, though, is I really like the designing of his suits. Of course, what's little he has left of it. If you peel this away, this is actually softer plastic. You can see there's a rib cage underneath. What's left behind, at least of his lower torso, just a really gnarly looking Jason. One of my favorite things about this design of Jason is the fact that you can see his spinal cord on the back of the figure's body. Really, really cool elements here. If I could offer up only one criticism about the figure, as much as I really love this design of Jason, I do feel in a way like the coloring of his suit is too green. I maybe would have darkened it a little bit more than what it is. I know it really is green like this in the movie, but a lot of times by the way it's shot, and especially if Jason gets wet, it usually reads more like a little more of a dark green than actually kind of more of the green we get right here. This green really does remind me of the original cult classics Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th Part 7, a figure I reviewed, I can't even imagine how many years ago I actually first looked at that figure. But if anything, I would say maybe this needs just to be a little bit darker of a green than what we actually get. But you can see all the little holes and rips and tears revealing what's left of his body underneath. I probably have said left of his body underneath several times in this review. His pants don't get unscathed when it comes to certainly the damage. You can see there's little kneecaps there exposed, all these bones protruding out from his skin, and just ripped away sections of his suit. There's a lot of wear and tear to Jason Voorhees. He's not been unscathed through the whole process of how many Jason Voorhees films? Well, up to 7, of course, I guess 6 if you don't count the first film. And it definitely shows not only on the design of the character in the film, but also the way that NECA's done this. If anything, I could also say, I feel like he should be a little bit bigger, a little wider. But other than that, really happy with how this guy did turn out. Now, for the figure's articulation, it might be a little easier just to first remove the mask, just because I know if I want to start to rotate the figure's head around, obviously with the mask being attached only by a peg, it probably cause a little bit more problems. So the head is going to be on a ball joint. It does move back and forth. It does move up. It does move down. And, of course, you can rock it back and forth. I don't think I have it all the way on there. Just put a little bit more pressure on that. Jason's body is on actually, just surprisingly, for all the stuff that he has going on, layers upon layers of sculpting, he does actually still possess an upper torso ball joint, so you can rotate it all the way around. The figure does also have a secondary ball joint at the base of his abdomen. His arms do come out, although I've noticed with this Jason, just by the way that the sculpting, there's so much happening here for the tops of his shoulders that I can't quite pull off anything more than a 45-degree angle bend. The arms do rotate all the way around, although they squeak and creak just because, again, they're rubbing against the softer plastic of the overlay that they've got for his body. Figure has double hinges in his elbows, and you can double hinge and bend those elbows there. The hands do rotate also all the way around. Then for his legs, the legs do split. They are on ball joints. You can see the inside cavities of the thighs. You can bring the legs forward, bring the legs back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh, double hinge, or single hinge, I should say, for the knee. And really, let me just stop for a second before we kind of, resume with the rest of this. I really like the way that you get a pretty seamless look for his lower legs. There's a hinge joint there, and you can see only the hinge once you start to bend the knee. Without that, really, if you have the legs straight, it's a pretty, again, consistently clean look. There's no real breakup of where the joints would actually be. And then there, again, for the ankles, you can move them back and forth this way. The only thing I would also say is by the way that they've actually got the pants draped down the boots like this, it does cause a little bit of problems where I can't get the feet to bend up high enough that sometimes Jason feels like he wobbles a little bit more. He doesn't feel maybe as flat planted with his feet. And maybe some of the other Jasons that we got from before. Speaking of other Jasons from before. Where's the other Jason? I was going to bring in the other Jason from Friday the 13th Part 6. There's Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th Part 6. Again, this was the reissue that we looked at. Unfortunately, a little loose on the legs. But again, nice updates for what we got from what we initially got from Friday the 13th Part 6. Whether you really love the garden gloves or not, I will definitely say Friday the 13th Part 7 Jason is definitely one of the more interesting, if not the most coolest looking design he had in all the sequels. It translated also as well to a very interesting looking figure. Now, this one is actually a fairly old figure as well. I'm just looking at the packaging here. The packaging dates this at 2020, so about 4 years ago. I don't think there has been a reissue of this guy. If that's the case, I'll still try to track one down. The only thing, again, I would certainly love to see for a future reissue of this figure is maybe, if anything, darkening the colors of the green. I think the green is maybe a little too light. I know it's really supposed to be a continuation of the same colors of suit that he had, the same color of shirt as he had in the original Friday 6. But I think, if anything, maybe make the suit a little wetter looking, giving him more of a shinier coat. Jason goes through the water a lot in Friday 7. And I think I'd love to see some of that translated for maybe, you never know, a future reissue from the folks over at NECA Toys. Jumping now, Jason, over to the turntable. The figure is rotating, as you can see, with its alternate head sculpt. One of the possible ways of displaying the figure, if you certainly wanted to. NECA always includes, usually with these Jasons, an alternate portrait. This one just happens to have the surprised look on his face as Tina's splitting away his mask. The mask successfully does plug onto the back of the figure's head, although it doesn't attach very securely. So we want to make sure, of course, that you get him in the pose that you want first, then attach the mask, because if you try to move the head, usually the mask easily falls off. No harm, no foul. I've got the figure currently displayed, by the way, FYI, with his tent spike. I have really considered, honestly, getting a second release of this guy. I have been kind of checking around online. There are a few sites that have him in stock, but hey, you never really know what version of this guy or what lot number that Jason's going to be. I'm going to maybe wait and see if Entertainment Earth eventually stocks this guy. And then usually they'll always put the date of when the guy gets stocked. Kind of give me somewhat of an idea, because I think this one was from 2020. So this one is about 4 years old. There's a very strong likelihood that NECA has re-released this guy in recent memory. But again, I can't tell whether, until I get eventually a second version of this guy, I can't tell if there's been any changes that have been made. Changes are obviously only going to be cosmetic if I do get a second release of this Jason. I mean, obviously, I would love to see this guy get a version 2 release, maybe making the outfit a little bit more wet, giving him embedded nails into his body and into his head. And maybe, hey, you never know, they could have also included some flame effects. I know we don't usually get version 2 of any of these horror characters, but it's certainly something if NECA would consider. They already really have the inventory of the guy's molds. Why not just release this guy again as a version 2? And giving him again some additional accessories that weren't present with this initial release. I don't think there's anything I would necessarily have changed this Jason, other than maybe darkening the color of his suit, maybe if anything making the suit look a little bit more wet. Like the Dream sequence, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, Jason Voorhees, where visibly that guy had a lot more of a wetter shirt and wetter pants. They probably could have done something very similar here as well to Jason. This Jason is a little drier than I would have still expected, but the figure has quite a lot of accessories. Some of which, too much of which, actually is just kind of hard to figure out which ones you like to have the figure displayed. I've got the figure displayed right now with the 10 spike. It's not usually the one I go with, but there's not really one that I would have displayed with the splitting away mask anyways. So I thought it would be a rightful pick, no pun intended, to display him with this instead. What do you guys think of Jason Voorhees? Let me know down below in the comment section. Have you had the chance to pick up the Friday the 13th Part 7 of the New Blood Jason Voorhees? And if you do, how do you have him displayed? Do you have him displayed with the split away mask, or you just have him displayed with his regular mask? Either way, he's a fun looking figure. Again, big thank you to Jackson that did reach out to me. He is going to be apparently getting this as a birthday gift and just wanted me to follow up and do a re-review of him. Happy to oblige, Jackson. Happy birthday. If you guys also enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and certainly would like to see more Jason Voorhees reviews, I can't promise that we have a lot on the way. I mean, there are a few that I could probably consider still doing a re-review of. But in the meantime, and if you guys wanted to stick around, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Making sure you turn on the bell notification. And more importantly, making sure you're coming back here on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.